You're interfering with the proper function of government. That's terrorism. That's paper terrorism.
Mm.
It's when you're, like I said, but that's a good thing too. I told the marshals, I said, it would kind of be good to be charged with interfering with the proper function of government, because then I would get them to admit once and for all that that courthouse is government employees. I said, because right now I'm having a hard time with them to admit that either they're a government employee in their federal court or they're a private corporation called the United States. I said, so if it's a private corporation called the United States, yes, I'd be harassing them. It'd be like I'm calling Coca-Cola or Pepsi-Cola, or I'm calling a company, a private corporation, and I keep calling them, demanding things from them, and I have no right to do that.
Mm.
I said, so if the United States District Court tries to say that they're a government and I'm interfering with the proper function of government, I said, well, that's wonderful. I said that they finally admit that they're the government, that they're not a private organization. I said, we're having a big problem. I said, all of us out here, I said, who's listening to these talk shows, all of us have this big problem. Is it a government court or is it a private organization? If they're private, if they're all private corporations, these courts, well, then we have no rights. If they're government, if they're public corporations, if it's a public building and a public court, we have rights. So that's what I said to the marshals too. I said, so we're all having a big problem out here. So I said, I hope they admit that they're a government agency, because then I have to answer the man. Then I have rights. I said, but if they're not government, it's not a public court, then it's a private court, and I have no rights. Then I have to ask them permission to be there and to talk to them. I said, right, then I'd be harassing them. I said, that'd be more harassing them than terrorism. Of course, terrorism can be directed towards the government and the interference with the proper function of a government. That's terrorism, by paper or by, physical threats. That's terrorism is only to a government and the function of a government. I said, you can't terrorize Coca-Cola. That's ridiculous. You could call them up.
I got some emails coming across my desk from Rod Glass saying that all the government offices have been vacated.
Well,
if
all the government, if they've been vacated,
they're all private. He said they're all private entities in there, private contractors.
Well, then you can't be charged then with terrorism, paper terrorism, because terrorism is directed to a government. Terrorism is not directed towards Coca-Cola. I could be charged with harassing the poor receptionist at Coca-Cola every 5 minutes, calling her up. But you can't be charged with terrorizing the lady at Coca-Cola, just trying to get her to, say, hey, man, there's a mouse in my bottle of Coke. Who's going to pay me for this? She can't say, oh, that you're terrorizing, you're interrupting with the proper function of Coca-Cola. She sees your phone number coming through on her switchboard. She just says, oh, you again? Click, and she can just hang up.
Well, that's harassment. I don't know if I would call it terrorism. The government puts these labels on people